I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I thought I understood the sting of being stabbed in the back by someone you trust. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the moment I discovered that my closest colleague, someone I'd mentored and supported for 3 years, had been systematically destroying my career while smiling to my face every single day. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we never see coming. It's also the story of how I made sure she never saw me coming either. The first crack in my perfectly constructed reality appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember it so clearly because I had worn my lucky blazer, the navy one with the silver buttons that made me feel invincible during presentations. I needed that confidence because today was supposed to be the day I finally heard back about the senior marketing director position I'd been chasing for 8 months. I walked into Brennan and Associates with my usual morning routine, coffee from the cart outside, quick check of emails on my phone in the elevator, and a mental run-through of my daily priorities. The marketing floor buzzed with its typical energy, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the low hum of ambitious people trying to climb the corporate ladder. I'd been part of this ecosystem for 6 years, working my way up from junior analyst to marketing manager, and I knew every face, every voice, every office politics dynamic like the back of my hand, or so I thought. "Sarah, there you are." My stomach dropped at the sound of Jennifer's voice calling my name. Not because I didn't like Jennifer, quite the opposite. Jennifer Martinez had been my mentee, my project partner, and honestly, one of my closest friends at work. We'd bonded over late-night deadline pushes, shared frustrations about our male colleagues taking credit for our ideas, and countless lunch conversations about our career aspirations. I'd championed her for promotions, recommended her for high-visibility projects, and spent hours helping her refine her presentation skills. But there was something in her tone that morning that made my chest tighten. Something that didn't match the bright smile on her face as she approached my desk. "Hey, Jen, what's up?" I set down my coffee and tried to shake off the weird feeling creeping up my spine. "I just wanted to catch you before the department meeting. I know you've been waiting to hear about the senior director position, and She paused, and I watched her face do this strange thing where it looked like she was trying to choose between expressions. "I wanted you to hear it from me first." My heart started beating faster. "Hear what from you first?" "They offered me the position." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my body sway slightly, and I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. What? I know. I'm just as surprised as you are. I mean, I applied for it too, but I really thought you had it in the bag." Her voice carried this tone of false modesty that I'd never noticed before. "But Mr. Brennan said they were looking for someone with a fresh perspective, someone who could bring innovative ideas to the team." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. Jennifer had been at the company for 3 years. 3 years to my 6. She'd never led a major campaign. She'd never managed a team larger than 2 people. She'd never even presented to the board of directors. "Jen, I don't understand. When did you apply?" "We never talked about you applying for the same position." "Oh, I submitted my application a few weeks ago. I didn't want to make it awkward between us, you know? I figured we'd both interview and may the best person win." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I guess I won." Something cold settled in my chest. "A few weeks ago? The application deadline was 2 months ago." "Was it? I guess I got confused about the timeline." She shrugged, and that shrug felt like a slap. "Anyway, I should probably go prepare for the announcement. I'm sure everyone will be excited about the new direction." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the polished floor with what seemed like deliberate emphasis. She moved with a confidence I'd never seen before, her shoulders back, her head held high. She moved like someone who'd been planning this moment for a long time. I sat there at my desk, staring at my computer screen without seeing it, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Applications submitted weeks after the deadline, fresh perspective, innovative ideas. The phrases echoed in my mind, but they felt disconnected from reality. I had been the one developing innovative campaigns. I had been the one staying late to perfect presentations. I had been the one who'd increased our department's revenue by 37% over the past 2 years. I had been the one Mr. Brennan specifically praised for my forward-thinking approach. Just last month, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Rachel. "How did the promotion news go? Celebrating tonight?" I couldn't even type a response. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but what was I supposed to say? That my mentee had somehow leapfrogged over me for a position I'd been grooming myself for since before she even knew the company existed. Sarah? I looked up to find my colleague Marcus standing next to my desk, his expression concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay? Did you know Jennifer applied for the senior director position? The words came out before I could stop them. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Jennifer? Are you serious? She just got promoted to senior marketing specialist 6 months ago. That would be like 3 levels up. She got it. She got what? The position. The senior director position. They offered it to her. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then looked around the office as if he were trying to spot hidden cameras. That doesn't make sense. You've been the obvious choice for that role since it opened up. Everyone knows that. Apparently not everyone. The department meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I spent the next hour and a half in a daze, mechanically responding to emails and trying to focus on my work while my mind churned through possibilities. Maybe there had been some mistake. Maybe Jennifer had misunderstood something. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding that would be cleared up when Mr. Brennan made the official announcement. But deep down, I knew better. Deep down, I was starting to realize that something much bigger was happening here, something that had been building while I was completely oblivious. The conference room filled up with the usual suspects, our department's 12 team members, plus Mr. Brennan and his assistant Kelly. I took my usual seat near the middle of the table, while Jennifer sat closer to the front. She kept glancing back at me with what I can only describe as apologetic smiles, but there was something else in her eyes, something that looked almost like pity. Good morning, everyone, Mr. Brennan began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had intimidated me when I was younger but now just sounded tired. I know you've all been waiting for news about the senior marketing director position, and I'm pleased to announce that we've found an exceptional candidate from within our own team. My stomach clenched. Even though I already knew what was coming, hearing it officially felt like a fresh wound. Jennifer Martinez has demonstrated remarkable leadership potential and innovative thinking throughout her time here. Her fresh perspective and ability to connect with our younger demographic make her the perfect fit for this role as we expand our digital marketing initiatives. Polite applause filled the room, but I could feel eyes on me. My colleagues knew I had been the front runner. They knew this was unexpected. I forced myself to clap along, to maintain some semblance of professional composure, even though I felt like I was drowning. Jennifer will be transitioning into her new role over the next 2 weeks, and I'm confident she'll bring great things to our department. Congratulations, Jennifer. Jennifer stood up, her face beaming with what looked like genuine joy. Thank you so much, Mr. Brennan. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I have so many ideas for how we can improve our processes and reach new markets. As she spoke, I found myself studying her face, her mannerisms, her words. Was this the same person who had sat in my office just last month, asking for advice about her career trajectory? The same person who had thanked me for always believing in her potential when no one else did? I also want to thank Sarah, Jennifer continued, and my blood ran cold. She's been such an incredible mentor to me. I've learned so much from her strategic thinking and attention to detail. I hope I can bring some of that same excellence to this new position. The room turned to look at me, and I realized I was expected to respond. I managed to force out something that sounded like congratulations, but the words felt like glass in my throat. After the meeting, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked pale, almost gray, and there were dark circles under my eyes that hadn't been there that morning. I looked like someone who had been punched in the gut and was still trying to figure out which direction the blow had come from. That's when I started to really think about the past few months. Really think about the conversations I'd had with Jennifer, the projects we'd worked on together, the trust I'd placed in her. And slowly, like puzzle pieces clicking into place, I began to see patterns I'd missed before. 3 months ago, Jennifer had asked to shadow me during my presentation to the board about our fourth quarter marketing strategy. She'd said she wanted to learn from watching me present to senior leadership. I'd been flattered and had spent extra time walking her through my approach, my key talking points, even my backup slides in case they had specific questions. 2 months ago, she'd asked if she could review my application materials for the senior director position, just to see how someone with your experience approaches these things. She'd said, I might apply for something similar in the future. I'd shared my entire application, my strategic vision, my 5-year plan for the department, my detailed analysis of our market positioning. 1 month ago, she'd started staying late more often, always with some project or deadline that seemed to require her presence after hours. I'd thought she was finally showing the kind of initiative that would help her advance her career. I'd even mentioned her improved work ethic to Mr. Brennan during our monthly one-on-one. And 2 weeks ago, she'd asked if I'd noticed anything different about Mr. Brennan's management style lately. "He seems more interested in fresh perspectives," she'd said. "Less focused on seniority and more on innovation." At the time, I'd agreed, thinking it was a positive evolution in his leadership approach. Standing in that bathroom, I realized I had been played. Systematically, methodically, brilliantly played by someone I'd trusted completely. But the full scope of her betrayal wouldn't become clear until I got back to my desk and found an email waiting for me. The subject line read, "Congratulations on your promotion." But when I opened it, I realized it had been sent to me by mistake. It was meant for Jennifer, from someone named David Chen at our main competitor, Hartwell Marketing. "Jennifer, congratulations on landing the senior director position. I knew our strategy sessions would pay off. Looking forward to our dinner celebration tomorrow night. You've earned it after all the hard work you put into positioning yourself perfectly for this role. David." I read the email 3 times, each time feeling my confusion deepen. Strategy sessions? Positioning herself? Who was David Chen, and why was he congratulating Jennifer on a promotion at our company? I did something I'd never done before in my professional life. I opened a private browsing window and started investigating. David Chen, as it turned out, was a senior vice president at Hartwell Marketing. He'd been with the company for 8 years and specialized in digital marketing strategies for mid-size businesses, exactly our client base. More importantly, his LinkedIn profile showed that he'd been connected to Jennifer for over a year. Their interactions on professional posts went back months, full of the kind of strategic insights and industry commentary that suggested a close working relationship. My hands were shaking as I continued digging. I found evidence of Jennifer attending Hartwell Marketing's industry events. I found photos of her at networking mixers where David Chen was also present. I found articles she'd shared that originated from Hartwell's thought leadership blog, always with commentary that seemed to align suspiciously with their strategic positioning. The picture that emerged was devastating. Jennifer hadn't just betrayed me, she'd been conducting what appeared to be a long-term strategy to position herself for my job while simultaneously building relationships with our main competitor. But the worst part, the part that made my vision blur with rage, was realizing that she'd been using me the entire time. Every conversation about strategy, every mentoring session, every piece of advice I'd given her, she'd been harvesting my knowledge to build her own career while systematically undermining mine. I sat there at my desk, surrounded by the normal sounds of office life, and felt something inside me break. Not just my heart or my pride, something deeper. Something that had to do with my faith in people, my belief in fairness, my assumption that hard work and loyalty meant something. "Sarah?" Marcus appeared at my desk again, looking even more concerned than before. "Are you okay? You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine," I lied, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "No, you're not. Come on, let's get some air." He practically dragged me to the small balcony that overlooked the city park. The fresh air hit my face like a slap, and I realized I'd been holding my breath without knowing it. "Talk to me," Marcus said gently. "What's really going on here?" I found myself telling him everything. The email I'd received by mistake. The evidence of Jennifer's relationship with our competitor. The way she'd been systematically extracting information from me over the past few months. The realization that my mentorship had been weaponized against me. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, this is corporate espionage. What you're describing isn't just workplace politics or even normal backstabbing. This is someone who's been planning your downfall for months." "I know." The words came out as barely a whisper. "You have to report this. This is illegal. What she's doing with the competitor, the way she's been using insider information." "With what proof?" I interrupted. "An email that was sent to me by mistake? LinkedIn connections? Photos at industry events? Everything she's done has been technically legal. Unethical as hell, but legal." Marcus was quiet again, and I could see him processing the same helpless frustration I was feeling. Jennifer had been smart about this. She'd operated in the gray areas, the spaces between black and white where proving malicious intent would be nearly impossible. "So what are you going to do?" I looked out at the city below us, at the thousands of people moving through their lives with purpose and direction, and I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. I'm going to make sure she regrets every single thing she's done. Sarah, you can't... I can't what? Fight back? Defend myself? Make sure that someone who's been systematically destroying my career faces consequences. I turned to look at him, and I saw something in his expression that told me he could see the change in me. She made this personal, Marcus. She didn't just take my promotion, she made me an unwitting accomplice in my own downfall. I know, but no buts. I'm not going to sit here and let her destroy everything I've worked for while she builds her career on my back. I felt something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. She wants to play games? Fine, let's play games. I went home early that day, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely a lie. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, as if the walls had moved closer together while I was gone. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring at the city lights beginning to twinkle outside my window. That's when I started to plan. I'd always been good at strategy. It's why I'd excelled in marketing, why I'd been so successful at building campaigns and managing projects. But I'd never turned those skills on a person before. I'd never sat down with the specific goal of dismantling someone's career the way they'd dismantled mine. It felt wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because I'd always believed in taking the high road, in letting karma handle the people who wronged me. Right because Jennifer had forfeited any claim to my mercy the moment she decided to use my trust against me. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Every conversation I could remember, every piece of advice I'd given her, every time she'd asked for access to my work or my strategic thinking. I created a timeline of her behavior, mapping it against her interactions with David Chen and Hartwell Marketing. The pattern was even more damning when I laid it out chronologically. She'd connected with David Chen 2 months after I'd first mentioned my interest in the senior director position to her. Her first request to shadow me had come 1 week after she'd started following Hartwell Marketing's social media accounts. Her questions about my application materials had been asked 2 days after David Chen had posted about the importance of strategic vision in senior marketing roles. She'd been playing a long game, and I'd been her unwitting pawn. But now I was going to flip the board. I spent the next 3 days in a state of focused intensity that I'd never experienced before. I went to work, performed my duties, attended meetings, and maintained the facade of professional normalcy while my mind churned through possibilities and strategies. I started with research. Real research. The kind I'd done for major marketing campaigns but had never applied to corporate warfare. I created detailed profiles of everyone involved: Jennifer, David Chen, Mr. Brennan, the other members of our senior leadership team. I mapped their relationships, their communication patterns, their professional vulnerabilities. Jennifer, I realized, had made several critical mistakes in her confidence. She'd been sloppy with her digital footprint, leaving traces of her relationship with our competitor that could be connected if someone knew where to look. She'd been too comfortable with her deception, too convinced that I would never fight back. She was wrong about that. I discovered that David Chen had been recruited to Hartwell Marketing from a company that had been investigated for corporate espionage 3 years ago. The case had been settled out of court, but the details were public record. He'd been named as someone who'd participated in aggressive competitive intelligence gathering that had crossed ethical lines. I found evidence of Jennifer's attendance at Hartwell Marketing's private client events that weren't publicly advertised and that she would have needed an invitation to attend. I found her name on guest lists, her photo in background shots at their corporate social media posts, her participation in industry discussions that aligned suspiciously with our internal strategic planning. Most importantly, I found her mistake, the one piece of evidence that would unravel everything she'd worked for. 3 weeks ago, Jennifer had shared a strategic insight during our team meeting about targeting millennials in the luxury goods market. It was a brilliant insight, one that Mr. Brennan had praised and that had led to a new client presentation. I'd been impressed by her thinking and had even complimented her on the innovative approach. But that insight had originated from a proprietary research report that our company had commissioned 6 months ago. A report that had been classified as confidential and shared only with senior leadership and select team members working on related projects. Jennifer, at her level, shouldn't have had access to it, unless someone had given her access, someone who trusted her enough to share confidential information, someone like me. I remembered the conversation now, the way she'd casually mentioned wanting to understand our strategic positioning better, how she'd asked if there were any research reports or industry analyses that might help her think more strategically about our client base. I'd given her access to my shared folder, which included not just my own work, but also the confidential reports I'd been reviewing for my promotion application. She'd taken that insight from our confidential research and presented it as her own strategic thinking. It was a small thing, easily overlooked in the broader context of her betrayal, but it was also provable. I had the access logs, the timestamps, the paper trail that showed exactly when she'd accessed the report and when she'd presented the insight as her own. But more importantly, I had evidence that she'd shared that same insight with David Chen. I found it in a professional networking forum where they'd both participated in a discussion about marketing to younger demographics. Jennifer had posted the same insight, almost word for word, in a thread that David had started. The post was time-stamped 2 days before her presentation to our team. She'd stolen our proprietary research and shared it with our competitor before presenting it to our own team as her original thinking. That was intellectual property theft. That was grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. But I didn't want to just get her fired. I wanted to make sure she understood exactly what she'd done, exactly how thoroughly she'd underestimated me, and exactly how much she was going to regret trying to destroy my career. I wanted her to feel the same helpless rage I'd felt when I realized how completely I'd been played. So I started building my case, piece by piece, document by document. I compiled evidence of her relationship with our competitor, her theft of proprietary information, her systematic extraction of my strategic insights, and her deliberate manipulation of our mentoring relationship. But I also started building something else, a trap. I began sharing false information with Jennifer, carefully crafted lies designed to test her loyalty and document her willingness to betray our company. I told her about a fake client meeting, a fictional strategic initiative, a made-up budget allocation. Each piece of false information was carefully chosen to be something that would be valuable to our competitor and something that could be traced back to her if it appeared in external communications. I watched her like a hawk, documenting every interaction, every question, every request for information. I saved every email, every text message, every piece of communication that showed her attempts to extract information from me. And I waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Sitting in meetings where Jennifer presented herself as the innovative new leader of our department, watching her receive congratulations and praise that should have been mine, maintaining the facade of professional courtesy while I built the case that would destroy her career. But I held on to the cold determination that had settled in my chest that first day. Every time I felt my resolve wavering, every time I considered taking the high road and simply accepting what had happened, I remembered the look in her eyes when she'd told me about getting my promotion. The mix of pity and superiority that had made it clear she'd never seen me as an equal, only as a resource to be exploited. 2 weeks into my investigation, I got the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Jennifer took the bait on my fake client meeting, asking detailed questions about the fictional company and their supposed marketing needs. 3 days later, I found evidence of David Chen reaching out to that same fictional company, using talking points that were almost identical to the information I'd shared with Jennifer. She was actively feeding our competitor information in real time, using her position in our company to give them strategic advantages in pursuing our clients. That's when I knew I had her. I spent the next week finalizing my documentation, organizing my evidence, and preparing my presentation. I created a comprehensive dossier that laid out Jennifer's betrayal in methodical, undeniable detail. I had timestamps, communication records, access logs, and a clear timeline that showed the systematic nature of her actions. But I also had something else, a plan for her replacement. I'd been thinking about this aspect of my revenge for days. It wasn't enough to destroy Jennifer's career. I needed to position myself to step into the role that should have been mine from the beginning. I needed to make sure that when the dust settled, I would be the obvious choice to take over the senior director position. So I started documenting my own accomplishments, my strategic contributions, my leadership experience. I compiled every successful campaign I'd led, every innovative solution I'd developed, every client relationship I'd built. I created a portfolio that demonstrated not just my qualifications for the role, but my superiority to Jennifer in every measurable way. I also began quietly reaching out to key stakeholders in the company, scheduling informal coffee meetings and casual conversations where I could remind them of my contributions and my value to the organization. I was careful to keep these interactions professional and appropriate, but I made sure that when the time came to choose Jennifer's replacement, my name would be at the top of everyone's list. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using the same strategic thinking Jennifer had used against me, but there was one crucial difference. I was basing my campaign on actual accomplishments and genuine value, not on theft and deception. Finally, after 3 weeks of investigation and planning, I was ready to make my move. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Brennan for a Friday afternoon, telling his assistant that I needed to discuss some concerns about competitive intelligence and information security. I chose the timing carefully, late enough in the day that we wouldn't be interrupted, but early enough that he could take action before the weekend if he chose to. I spent that morning reviewing my evidence one final time, making sure every document was properly organized and every connection was clearly established. I practiced my presentation, rehearsing the key points and anticipating potential questions or objections. I felt calm in a way I hadn't in weeks. Not peaceful. There was too much anger and determination in me for peace, but focused. I knew exactly what I was going to do and exactly how I was going to do it. At 3 p.m., I walked into Mr. Brennan's office with my dossier and my laptop. He looked up from his desk with the slightly impatient expression he wore when he was busy, but trying to be polite. "Sarah, what can I do for you?" "I need to show you something, Mr. Brennan. Something that affects the security of our company and the integrity of our marketing department." His expression shifted to concern, and he gestured for me to sit down. "That sounds serious." "It is." I opened my laptop and pulled up the first document in my presentation. "I've discovered evidence that Jennifer Martinez has been systematically sharing confidential company information with our competitor, Hartwell Marketing." I watched his face carefully as I laid out the evidence. The connection to David Chen, the attendance at Hartwell's private events, the theft of our proprietary research, the real-time sharing of strategic information through our fake client test. With each piece of evidence, I watched his expression grow more serious, more concerned, more angry. By the time I finished, he was leaning back in his chair with a look of disgust that I'd never seen before. This is corporate espionage," he said, echoing Marcus's words from weeks earlier. "Yes, sir, it is." "And you're certain about this evidence?" "This isn't speculation or interpretation?" "I'm certain. I have documentation for every claim I've made. I have timestamps, communication records, access logs. I have evidence of her accessing confidential information and sharing it with our competitor. I have proof that she's been using her position here to feed intelligence to Hartwell Marketing." He was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents I'd provided. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on my investigation, at least 8 months. Possibly longer." 8 months. He shook his head. "This explains some things that haven't been making sense. Some client losses, some competitive disadvantages we've been experiencing." "Yes, sir. I believe Jennifer's activities have been directly impacting our business performance." "And you compiled all of this evidence yourself?" "Yes, sir. I felt it was important to be thorough before bringing this to your attention." He looked at me with what I can only describe as newfound respect. "This is exceptional work, Sarah. The level of detail, the organization, the clear documentation, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking and problem-solving we need in our senior leadership." I felt a warm satisfaction spread through my chest. "Thank you, sir. I'm going to need to involve HR and potentially our legal department. This is going to require a formal investigation, and depending on what they find, we may need to pursue criminal charges." "I understand. In the meantime, I want you to know that I'm extremely impressed with how you've handled this situation. You've shown real leadership and integrity in protecting our company's interests." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure even though I wanted to smile. "I just want what's best for the company, Mr. Brennan. I can see that. And I think we need to have a conversation about your future here. About roles that would better utilize your strategic capabilities and leadership skills." There it was. The opening I'd been working toward. "I would welcome that conversation, sir." "Good. Let me review this evidence more thoroughly and consult with HR and legal. We'll need to handle this carefully, but I want you to know that your actions here have demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking and integrity we need in our senior leadership team." I left his office feeling like I was floating. Not because I'd destroyed Jennifer's career, that was just justice. but because I'd proven my own worth in a way that was undeniable. I'd shown strategic thinking, investigative skills, loyalty to the company, and leadership under pressure. I'd demonstrated every quality that the senior director position required. Jennifer was at her desk when I walked past, reviewing what looked like budget projections for the next quarter. She looked up and smiled at me, that same false warmth she'd been showing for weeks. "Hey, Sarah, how's your day going?" "It's going very well, actually." "Very well indeed." If she noticed something different in my tone, she didn't show it. She just nodded and went back to her work, completely unaware that her career was about to implode around her. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of controlled anticipation. I knew it would take time for the formal investigation to begin, for HR and legal to review the evidence, for the administrative machinery of corporate justice to begin turning. But I also knew that once it started, it would be swift and decisive. Jennifer had been thorough in her betrayal, but she'd also been thorough in documenting it. Every email, every meeting, every piece of stolen information had left traces that would be impossible to deny or explain away. The weekend passed slowly. I tried to maintain my normal routine, but I felt like I was living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for Monday morning to arrive so I could see the consequences of my actions begin to unfold. On Sunday night, I got a text from Marcus. Saw Jennifer's car in the parking lot at 9 p.m. Working late on a Sunday seems unusual for her. Think something's up? I smiled as I typed back, probably just trying to get ahead of the week. You know how ambitious she is, but I knew better. Jennifer was probably getting a call from HR, or from Mr. Brennan, or from someone else who'd been brought into the loop about the investigation. She was probably scrambling to prepare her defense, to find explanations for the evidence I'd compiled, to figure out how she'd been caught. I hoped she was scared. I hoped she was feeling the same helpless panic I'd felt when I realized how thoroughly I'd been betrayed. I hoped she was lying awake at night, wondering how her perfect plan had fallen apart so completely. Monday morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit. Not the lucky blazer this time, but something more serious, more authoritative. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a senior leadership role, someone who could handle complex situations with grace and competence. I arrived at the office early, but not too early. I wanted to maintain the appearance of normalcy while staying alert for any signs of the investigation beginning to take effect. Jennifer wasn't at her desk when I arrived, which was unusual. She was typically one of the first people in the office, always eager to demonstrate her dedication and work ethic. Her absence felt significant, like the first domino falling in a carefully constructed sequence. At 9:30 a.m., I got an email from Mr. Brennan's assistant asking me to come to his office at my earliest convenience. I waited 15 minutes, not too eager but not dismissive either, before walking down the hall. Mr. Brennan's office also contained two other people, Linda from HR and a man I didn't recognize but who had the unmistakable look of a corporate lawyer. "Sarah, thank you for coming in. I'd like you to meet James Patterson from our legal department. He's been reviewing the evidence you provided on Friday." I shook hands with both of them, maintaining my professional composure while my heart raced with anticipation. "Ms. Peterson," the lawyer said, "I want to commend you on the thoroughness of your investigation. This is some of the most well-documented evidence of corporate espionage I've seen in my 15 years of practice." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I felt it was important to be comprehensive." "Indeed. Based on your evidence, we've initiated a formal investigation into Ms. Martinez's activities. We've also been in contact with our cybersecurity team to assess the full scope of the information breach." Linda from HR leaned forward. "Sarah, we're going to need you to provide a formal statement about your interactions with Jennifer and your discovery of her activities. This will be part of the official record." "Of course. I'm happy to cooperate fully with the investigation. We also want to discuss your role going forward," Mr. Brennan said. "Given the circumstances, the senior director position is going to be vacant again. And based on your handling of this situation, I think we need to seriously consider you for the role." I felt that warm satisfaction again, but I kept my expression neutral. "I would be honored to be considered, Mr. Brennan." "More than considered," he said. "As far as I'm concerned, you've already proven that you have the strategic thinking, the leadership skills, and the integrity we need in that position. The investigation and formal processes will need to run their course, but I want you to know that you'll be stepping into the senior director role as soon as we can make it official." It was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd planned for, everything I'd dreamed of when I started building my case against Jennifer. But it was also more than that. It was validation that my approach had been right, that my skills were valuable, that my loyalty and competence were recognized and appreciated. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't. You've already proven that. As I left the meeting, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly. Relief that my plan had worked. Anticipation for the next phase of my career. But also something darker, a cold pleasure at the thought of Jennifer's world falling apart the way mine had weeks earlier. I was walking back to my desk when I saw her. Jennifer was coming out of the elevator, looking pale and shaken. She was carrying a small box, the kind employees use when they're clearing out their desk. Our eyes met across the office floor, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, understanding, fear, and finally, something that looked like respect. She walked over to me, and I could see that her hands were shaking slightly. "It was you," she said quietly. "You figured it out." "I did." "How long have you known?" "Long enough." She nodded, looking down at the box in her hands. "I underestimated you." "Yes, you did. I thought you were too trusting, too naive to see what was happening. I thought you'd just accept it and move on." "I'm not as naive as you thought." She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something genuine in her expression. Not the false warmth or the calculated charm, but actual honesty. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. What I did was wrong." Yes, it was. I was so focused on advancing my career, on proving myself, that I lost sight of everything else. Ethics, loyalty, friendship. I convinced myself that business was just business, that everyone was playing the same game. Not everyone. Not everyone. She paused, looking around the office one last time. "For what it's worth, you deserved that promotion. You always deserved it. And you'll be better in that role than I ever would have been." I watched her walk away, carrying her box of personal items and the wreckage of her career. Part of me felt a moment of sympathy for her. She looked so small and defeated, so different from the confident woman who'd announced her promotion to me just a few weeks earlier. But mostly I felt a deep satisfaction, not just because justice had been served, but because I'd proven to myself that I was stronger than I'd realized. I'd faced betrayal and manipulation, and instead of being crushed by it, I'd used it as fuel to demonstrate my own capabilities. Jennifer had tried to destroy my career by stealing my promotion, but in the end, she'd given me something better: the opportunity to prove that I was exactly the kind of leader the company needed. 3 days later, I was sitting in what had briefly been Jennifer's office, now mine, reviewing the strategic plans for our department's next quarter. My name was on the door, my vision was guiding our initiatives, and my leadership was setting the direction for our team. I'd gotten the promotion I'd always wanted, but more importantly, I'd learned something valuable about myself. I'd learned that I was capable of playing the game when I needed to, of being strategic and calculating when the situation demanded it. I'd learned that my loyalty and integrity weren't weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths that could be leveraged. But most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about proving that you're better than they ever realized. Jennifer had tried to steal my future, but in the end she'd given me something I never would have had otherwise: the absolute certainty that I belonged in that corner office, that I'd earned my success through my own merit, and that no one could ever take that away from me. The game was over, and I had won completely. 2 months into my new role as Senior Marketing Director, I was beginning to understand that revenge, even perfectly executed revenge, comes with its own set of complications. The initial rush of satisfaction had been intoxicating, walking into my new office every morning, seeing my name on the door, knowing that I'd not only reclaimed what was rightfully mine, but had done so through my own strategic brilliance. But as the weeks passed, I discovered that destroying someone's career, even someone who deserved it, leaves traces that linger longer than you expect. The office dynamics had shifted in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My colleagues looked at me differently now, not with the casual familiarity of a peer, but with something that combined respect and wariness. They'd all witnessed Jennifer's sudden departure, and while the official story was kept vague for legal reasons, everyone knew that I'd been the one to uncover whatever had led to her downfall. I'd become the person who'd proven that actions had consequences, that betrayal would be met with swift and decisive justice. Marcus was the first to comment on the change. We were having lunch at our usual spot, the small cafe across from the office, when he set down his sandwich and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know, Sarah, you're different now." "Different how?" I asked, though I suspected I knew what he meant. "Harder. More. Calculated. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's noticeable." I considered his words while I picked at my salad. Maybe I just learned to protect myself. Maybe. Or maybe you learned that you're really good at corporate warfare, and that's a dangerous thing to learn about yourself. He wasn't wrong. The process of dismantling Jennifer's career had revealed capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. I'd discovered that I could be patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless when the situation called for it. I'd learned to compartmentalize my emotions, to think several moves ahead, to turn my natural strategic instincts into weapons. It was a skill set that served me well in my new position, but it also changed how I approached every interaction, every relationship, every potential threat. The paranoia was the hardest part to adjust to. Having been betrayed so thoroughly by someone I'd trusted completely, I found myself analyzing every conversation, every request for information, every friendly gesture from colleagues. I'd developed what I thought of as my early warning system, a mental checklist of behaviors and patterns that might indicate someone was playing their own game at my expense. When my new assistant, Brian, asked to review my strategic planning documents to better understand the department's direction, I found myself hesitating in a way that would have been unthinkable before Jennifer. When Lisa from accounting started asking casual questions about our budget allocations during coffee breaks, I made mental notes of what she was asking and why. When Tom from sales suggested we grab drinks to discuss potential cross-department collaborations, I found myself wondering what he really wanted. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, but it was also effective. I'd created a defensive perimeter around myself and my work that made it nearly impossible for anyone to access information they shouldn't have, or to manipulate me the way Jennifer had. I'd learned to trust, but verify, to mentor, but with boundaries, to lead, but with my eyes wide open. 3 months after Jennifer's departure, I got an unexpected phone call that reminded me that the consequences of our little war extended far beyond our office walls. It was from David Chen at Hartwell Marketing. "Ms. Peterson, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from our mutual contact at the Marketing Association." I felt that familiar cold alertness settle over me. "What can I do for you, Mr. Chen?" I wanted to discuss a potential opportunity. "I know there's been some upheaval in your department recently, and I thought this might be a good time to explore whether you'd be interested in joining our team at Hartwell." The audacity of it was breathtaking. David Chen, the man who'd been receiving stolen information from Jennifer, was now trying to recruit me. I had to admire the brass even as I felt my anger rising. "That's an interesting proposition," I said carefully. "What makes you think I'd be interested in leaving my current position?" "Well, given the circumstances surrounding your colleague's departure, I thought you might be looking for a fresh start. Somewhere your talents would be better appreciated." I almost laughed. He was either incredibly naive or incredibly arrogant if he thought I didn't know about his role in Jennifer's schemes. "I'm very happy in my current position, Mr. Chen. In fact, I've recently been promoted to Senior Marketing Director." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see. Congratulations." "Thank you. I should mention that I'm aware of your previous relationship with my former colleague. I hope that won't create any awkwardness between our companies going forward." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you know exactly what I mean, but I appreciate the call. It's always good to know where everyone stands." I hung up feeling a dark satisfaction. David Chen had just learned that the person who'd helped destroy his inside source was not someone he wanted to tangle with. More importantly, he'd learned that I knew exactly who he was and what he'd been doing. But the call also served as a reminder that Jennifer's betrayal had been part of a larger ecosystem of corporate espionage and competitive intelligence gathering. She hadn't been acting alone. She'd been part of a network that extended beyond our immediate professional circle. That realization made me more determined than ever to protect not just my own position, but the integrity of our entire organization. I began implementing new security protocols in our department, updating our information access controls, and creating audit trails for sensitive documents. I instituted regular security briefings for my team, brought in consultants to assess our vulnerability to competitive intelligence gathering, and established relationships with our legal and IT security teams that would help us identify and respond to future threats. My colleagues initially grumbled about the new procedures, but I'd learned to frame them in terms of protecting our competitive advantages rather than preventing betrayal. We have valuable intellectual property and strategic insights that give us an edge in the marketplace, I'd explain. These protocols ensure that edge stays with us. The improvements caught the attention of senior leadership. Mr. Brennan mentioned my proactive approach to information security during our quarterly review, and I was asked to present our new protocols to the board of directors as a potential model for other departments. Standing in that boardroom, presenting to the same executives who'd once seemed so intimidating, I felt a profound shift in how I saw myself and my career. I was no longer just someone who executed marketing strategies. I was someone who thought strategically about the business itself, who anticipated threats and opportunities, who could lead complex initiatives that extended beyond my immediate area of responsibility. Ms. Peterson, one of the board members said after my presentation, "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need throughout the organization. Have you considered expanding your role to include enterprise-wide security protocols?" I had not, but I was certainly interested. I'd be honored to explore that possibility. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting. I think we may have some interesting opportunities to discuss. As I left that boardroom, I realized that Jennifer's betrayal had set in motion a chain of events that was taking my career in directions I'd never imagined. Her attempt to destroy my future had instead accelerated it, forcing me to develop skills and perspectives that made me more valuable to the organization than I'd ever been before. But the most significant change wasn't in my professional life, it was in my personal relationships and how I approached trust itself. I'd always been someone who believed in the fundamental goodness of people, who assumed positive intent until proven otherwise. Jennifer had shattered that worldview, but what emerged from the wreckage was something more nuanced and, I thought, more realistic. I didn't become cynical exactly, but I became more discerning. I learned to distinguish between trust that was earned and trust that was assumed. I developed better boundaries, not just around information, but around emotional investment. I stopped mentoring people who hadn't proven their loyalty and integrity. I became more selective about who I brought into my inner circle and more careful about how much of myself I revealed to casual colleagues. The irony was that this made me a better leader. Instead of being driven by a need to be liked or to help everyone around me succeed, I focused on building a team of people who shared my values and my commitment to excellence. I learned to identify the Jennifer Martinez types before they could get close enough to cause damage, and I learned to reward and promote the people who demonstrated genuine loyalty and competence. 6 months after Jennifer's departure, I was settling into my new approach to leadership when I received an unexpected email that brought the whole situation full circle. It was from Jennifer herself. "Sarah, I hope you'll read this. I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you delete this without responding. But I wanted you to know that I've spent the last 6 months thinking about what I did and why I did it, and I owe you a real apology. Not the superficial one I gave you on my last day, but a genuine acknowledgement of how wrong I was and how much damage I caused. I also wanted you to know that your actions, exposing what I'd been doing, probably saved my career in the long run. I've been working with a therapist to understand why I thought it was acceptable to betray someone who had been nothing but supportive and generous with me. I've learned some difficult truths about myself, and I'm working to become the kind of person who deserves the trust and mentorship you offered me. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away, and I'm deeply sorry. I also wanted you to know that I never shared any information with David Chen after I was terminated. I know that probably doesn't matter to you, but I wanted you to know that I drew the line there. I hope you're thriving in your new role. From everything I've heard, you're exactly the kind of leader that company needs. Jennifer." I read the email 3 times, each time feeling a different mix of emotions. Anger, because the damage was done and apologies couldn't undo it. Sadness, because of what our friendship could have been if she'd chosen differently. But also something like closure, because it confirmed what I'd already suspected, that Jennifer's betrayal had been driven by her own insecurities and ambitions, not by any failing on my part. I didn't respond to the email, but I didn't delete it either. I filed it away as a reminder of the lesson I'd learned about trust and betrayal, about the importance of protecting yourself without losing your capacity for leadership and mentorship. The real test of my new approach came 8 months later when I hired a new team member, Amanda, fresh out of business school with impressive credentials and obvious ambition. She reminded me of myself at that age, eager, hardworking, hungry for mentorship and opportunities to prove herself. She also reminded me uncomfortably of Jennifer. I found myself watching Amanda carefully, looking for signs of the behaviors that had been warning flags with Jennifer. The excessive interest in my strategic thinking, the requests for access to confidential information, the casual questions about my relationships with senior leadership, the networking activities that seemed to extend beyond appropriate professional boundaries. But Amanda was different. When she asked to review my strategic planning documents, she explained specifically how it would help her understand her own role better. When she requested access to research reports, she showed me her work plan and explained how the information would be used. When she asked about my career path, she framed it as seeking advice rather than gathering intelligence. More importantly, she demonstrated loyalty in small ways that built trust over time. She protected confidential information without being asked. She gave me credit for my ideas instead of presenting them as her own. She brought me opportunities and insights that benefited the department rather than just her own advancement. Slowly, carefully, I began to mentor Amanda the way I'd once mentored Jennifer. But this time, I did it with better boundaries, clearer expectations, and a more strategic approach to building trust. I shared information and opportunities based on what Amanda had proven she could handle, not on what she asked for. I evaluated her loyalty and integrity through small tests before involving her in larger strategic initiatives. The relationship that developed was healthier than the one I'd had with Jennifer, built on mutual respect rather than one-sided generosity. Amanda became a valuable team member and, eventually, a trusted colleague. But she never became the kind of protégé I'd tried to make Jennifer, because I'd learned that level of trust had to be earned over years, not months. A year after Jennifer's departure, I was invited to speak at a conference about competitive intelligence and corporate security. The organizers wanted me to talk about best practices for protecting proprietary information in marketing departments, but I knew the real story was more complex and more personal. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of marketing professionals who looked much like I had 2 years earlier, confident, ambitious, maybe a little naive about the darker side of corporate competition, I found myself telling a version of my story that I'd never shared before. How many of you have mentored someone in your organization? I asked. Most of the hands in the room went up. And how many of you have been mentored by someone who made a real difference in your career? Again, most hands went up. Mentorship is one of the most powerful tools we have for developing talent and building strong organizations, but it's also one of our greatest vulnerabilities. I talked about the importance of information security, about the need for protocols and procedures that protect competitive advantages. But I also talked about the human element, about the trust that makes organizations function and the betrayal that can destroy them. The person most likely to steal your ideas, your strategies, your competitive intelligence isn't a stranger or an obvious enemy. It's someone you trust, someone you've invested in, someone who knows your systems, your thinking, your weaknesses, someone who has access to your confidence and your information. I saw recognition in some faces in the audience, people who'd had their own experiences with betrayal, who understood the complexity of balancing trust and security in professional relationships. This doesn't mean we should stop mentoring people or building trusting relationships with our colleagues. It means we need to be smarter about how we do it. We need to verify as well as trust. We need to build systems that protect our organizations even when individual relationships fail. After the presentation, several people approached me with their own stories of betrayal and recovery. I realized that my experience with Jennifer wasn't unique. It was part of a broader pattern of corporate espionage and competitive intelligence gathering that affected organizations everywhere. But I also realized that my response to that betrayal had been unusual. Many people who'd experienced similar situations had become cynical and withdrawn, protecting themselves by refusing to trust or mentor anyone. Others had simply accepted the betrayal as part of doing business and continued to operate with the same vulnerabilities that had made them targets in the first place. I'd found a middle path, one that preserved my capacity for leadership and mentorship while protecting myself and my organization from future betrayal. It wasn't easy, and it required constant vigilance, but it was sustainable in a way that complete cynicism or naive trust were not. 18 months after Jennifer's departure, I was promoted again, this time to Vice President of Marketing and Strategy. The promotion came with a corner office, a significant salary increase, and responsibility for the entire marketing division. But more importantly, it came with the recognition that I'd become the kind of leader the organization needed, someone who could think strategically, protect the company's interests, and develop talent without compromising security. My first major initiative in the new role was implementing an organization-wide competitive intelligence program, not to gather information about our competitors, but to protect our own information from being gathered by them. I brought in consultants, established new protocols, and created training programs that helped employees understand the difference between networking and espionage, between mentorship and exploitation. The program was successful enough that other companies began asking for advice on implementing similar initiatives. I found myself consulting with organizations that had experienced their own betrayals, helping them develop systems that would prevent future incidents while maintaining the trust and collaboration that made them effective. 2 years after Jennifer's departure, I received another unexpected email, this time from a colleague at a different company who'd heard about my work in competitive intelligence and corporate security. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've been following your work in competitive intelligence, and I'm hoping you might have some advice for a situation we're dealing with. We recently discovered that one of our senior marketing managers has been sharing strategic information with a competitor. The situation is complicated because this person has been with us for several years and has strong relationships throughout the organization. We're trying to figure out how to address the issue without destroying team morale or creating a culture of suspicion. I know you've dealt with similar situations, and I'm hoping you might have some insights to share." I smiled as I read the email. It was a reminder of how much my professional identity had changed since Jennifer's betrayal. I was no longer just someone who'd been betrayed. I was someone who'd learned to turn that betrayal into expertise, into value for other organizations facing similar challenges. I spent an hour crafting a response that shared the key lessons I'd learned: the importance of documentation, the need for swift but fair action, the value of using the incident as an opportunity to strengthen security protocols, and the possibility of turning a negative situation into a positive outcome for the organization. But as I was writing, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about corporate security or competitive intelligence. It was about resilience, about the ability to be knocked down by betrayal and to get back up not just intact, but stronger. Jennifer's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been transformative. It had forced me to develop capabilities I hadn't known I possessed, to question assumptions I'd never examined, to build defenses I'd never needed before. It had made me a better leader, a more strategic thinker, and ultimately, a more successful professional. 3 years after Jennifer's departure, I was having lunch with Amanda, who had just been promoted to senior marketing manager. We were discussing her career goals and the challenges she was facing in her new role when she asked me a question that brought the whole journey full circle. "Sarah, can I ask you something personal? Everyone knows that you uncovered some kind of corporate espionage situation a few years ago, but nobody talks about the details. I've always wondered, how did you know to look for it? How did you figure out what was happening?" I considered how to answer. The full story of Jennifer's betrayal had become part of my professional legend, but I'd never shared the emotional details with anyone at work. The pain of discovering that someone I'd trusted had been systematically using me. The rage of realizing how thoroughly I'd been manipulated. The cold satisfaction of dismantling her career with the same strategic thinking she'd tried to steal from me. "I learned to pay attention," I said finally. "To trust my instincts when something didn't feel right. To verify information instead of just accepting it. To protect myself without becoming paranoid or cynical." That sounds like a hard lesson to learn. It was, but it was also necessary. The alternative was to let someone else's betrayal define my career and my approach to leadership. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "I've always admired how you balance being supportive with being strategic. You mentor people and share opportunities, but you also protect the organization's interests." That's exactly right. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. As we finished lunch and walked back to the office, I reflected on how far I'd come from that Tuesday morning when Jennifer had announced her promotion. I'd been knocked down, but I'd gotten back up. I'd been betrayed, but I'd learned to trust more wisely. I'd been manipulated, but I'd learned to be more strategic. Most importantly, I'd learned that revenge, when executed with intelligence and patience, could be transformative rather than destructive. Not because it destroyed your enemy, but because it proved to yourself that you were stronger than you'd realized. 5 years after Jennifer's departure, I was attending a marketing conference when I saw her across the room. She looked different, older, more subdued, but also more genuine than I remembered. She was wearing a simple business suit instead of the designer clothes she'd favored when we worked together, and she was listening to a presenter with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was still learning, still growing. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw a flash of recognition followed by something that looked like resignation. She nodded slightly, not quite a greeting, but an acknowledgement of our shared history. I nodded back, feeling none of the anger or satisfaction I might have expected. Instead, I felt something like detachment, as if I were observing a chapter of my life that belonged to someone else. During the lunch break, she approached me carefully, stopping a few feet away as if she were unsure whether she was welcome. "Sarah, I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to me." "I'm not sure either," I said honestly, "but I'm curious about what you've been doing." "I've been working for a nonprofit marketing agency. Smaller projects, less money, but cleaner work, more purpose-driven." I could see the irony in her choice of words. After spending years in corporate environments where she'd compromised her ethics for advancement, she'd chosen work that prioritized purpose over profit. "I've been following your career," she continued. "The work you've done in competitive intelligence, the speaking engagements, the consulting. It's impressive." "Thank you. I know this might sound strange, but I wanted to thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "Thank me?" "For stopping me, for exposing what I was doing. I was on a path that would have destroyed me eventually, and you forced me to confront who I was becoming before it was too late." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or false sincerity, but what I saw was something I'd never seen in Jennifer before: genuine humility. "I'm glad you were able to find a better path," I said finally. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness and I'm not asking for it, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away. Not just the job or the opportunities, but the chance to learn from someone who could have made me a better professional and a better person." I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for what our relationship could have been, satisfaction that justice had been served, and something like closure that I hadn't expected to find. "I hope you're happy in your new role," I said. "I am. It's not the career I thought I wanted, but it's the career I needed. What about you? Are you happy?" I considered the question. Was I happy? I was successful, respected, financially secure. I had a career that challenged me and work that made a difference. I had learned to protect myself without losing my capacity for leadership and mentorship. "I'm satisfied," I said finally. "I'm doing work that matters, and I'm doing it on my own terms." She nodded, understanding that this was as much closure as either of us was likely to get. "I should let you get back to the conference," she said. "But thank you for talking to me. It means more than you know." As she walked away, I realized that this conversation had given me something I hadn't known I needed: confirmation that my approach to her betrayal had been the right one. Not just strategically, but ethically. I'd responded to her betrayal with calculated precision rather than emotional destruction. I'd protected myself and my organization while still leaving room for her to learn and grow from her mistakes. That evening, I called Marcus to tell him about the encounter. "How did it feel?" he asked. "Seeing her again?" "Anticlimactic, actually. Like meeting a character from a book I'd read years ago. Familiar, but not particularly meaningful." "That's probably healthy. It means you've really moved on." "I think I have. The whole experience changed me, but not in the way I expected. I thought it would make me cynical or bitter. Instead, it made me more strategic. More careful about trust, but not less capable of it. That's the best possible outcome, I think. You learned from it without letting it destroy you." As I hung up the phone, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. Jennifer's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been the catalyst for the most significant growth period of my professional life. It had forced me to develop skills I'd never known I needed, to question assumptions I'd never examined, to build defenses that had made me stronger and more effective as a leader. I'd learned that revenge, when executed with intelligence and restraint, could be transformative rather than destructive. Not because it destroyed your enemy, but because it proved to yourself that you were capable of more than you'd realized. Most importantly, I'd learned that betrayal, while painful, didn't have to be permanent. It could be overcome, learned from, and ultimately used as a foundation for building something better. 6 years after Jennifer's departure, I was appointed to the company's executive committee, the youngest person and the first woman to hold that position. The announcement was accompanied by a profile in our industry magazine that highlighted my work in competitive intelligence and corporate security, my innovative approach to marketing strategy, and my reputation as a leader who could balance trust with prudence. The profile mentioned, in passing, that I'd been instrumental in uncovering a corporate espionage incident early in my career, but it framed the incident as an example of my strategic thinking and leadership rather than as a story of betrayal and revenge. I was fine with that narrative. The full story of Jennifer's betrayal and my response to it had become part of my professional legend, but it was no longer the defining moment of my career. It was simply one chapter in a larger story of growth, learning, and success. As I sat in my new office reviewing the strategic plan for the next fiscal year, I thought about the woman I'd been when Jennifer first announced her promotion. That woman had been talented and hardworking, but she'd also been naive about the realities of corporate competition and the importance of protecting herself and her organization. The woman I'd become was more complex, still generous and supportive, but also strategic and cautious, still willing to mentor and develop others, but only after they'd proven their loyalty and integrity, still trusting, but in a more measured and thoughtful way. It wasn't the transformation I would have chosen, but it was the transformation I'd needed. Jennifer's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been the catalyst for becoming the kind of leader I was meant to be. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all, not just recovering from her betrayal, but using it to become better than I'd ever been before. She'd tried to steal my future, but instead, she'd given me the tools to build a future that was far more successful than anything I'd originally imagined. The game was over, and I hadn't just won. I'd transformed the entire playing field to my advantage. That was a victory that would last far longer than any momentary satisfaction from her downfall. As I turned back to my work, I smiled slightly. Jennifer Martinez had taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my career, that the best way to handle betrayal isn't to become bitter or cynical, but to become smarter, stronger, and more strategic. It was a lesson I'd carry with me for the rest of my career, and one that would continue to serve me well in whatever challenges lay ahead. Because now I knew that no matter what happened, no matter who tried to betray or manipulate me, I had the skills and the strength to not just survive, but to thrive. And that knowledge was worth more than any promotion, any corner office, or any moment of revenge. It was the foundation of a career built on resilience, wisdom, and the kind of strategic thinking that could turn even the worst betrayal into an opportunity for growth and success. The story of Jennifer's betrayal had become the story of my transformation. And that, I realized, was exactly as it should be.